In this video, we're going to talk about how I wasted years of my life preparing for large tech interviews. And while I've now managed to work at some of the largest tech companies in the world, if I can go back in time, I'd probably do things pretty differently. If you're interested in working in big tech, be sure to stay until the end of the video to make sure that you don't make the same mistakes that I did. Since college, I was determined to work at a large tech company. Since accomplishing this goal, many things have changed, especially my outlook. Some of these companies receive millions of applications a year. It's kind of like a mob mentality. People want to work at these companies and therefore you do too, or at least that's how I was thinking. I realized that joining a large tech company wasn't actually what I wanted. Make sure that working at a large tech company is a goal of yours and not someone else's. In my case, I think I wanted to work at a big tech company because I was supposed to want to. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but I really think it's true. And while I did think that the things that each of these large tech companies did were cool, especially the scale at which they operate, I largely wanted to join one of them to actually prove to myself that I could. I thought other people saw these companies as the pinnacle of working in tech and believed smart people work there. So I wanted to work there too. I never felt comfortable with my coding skills in college, and shortly after joining the workforce, I learned about imposter syndrome and figured I was one. To me, I believe joining a larger tech company would change how others perceive my abilities, which would then change my own opinions about my skills. I know, genius, right? And while there's a lot wrong with this thinking, let's address a couple of the things that I now realize. The first is that living your life based on what others think you should do is ridiculous, and unfortunately, it's a trap that a lot of us fall into. Whether it's societal expectations or your parents, I strongly encourage you to figure out what you personally care about and chase after it. After all, it's your life for a reason. I think Alex Hormozy said it best with a simple tweet. Sometimes you have to let your parents' dream die for yours to live. And I think this is true. Parents here is largely interchangeable with anyone or anything influencing what you should do. Regardless of who or what that influence might be, there's three scenarios that result from this kind of situation. A, you set out to accomplish the other party's desires and feel resentful regardless of whether or not you succeed. B, you follow your own ambitions at the risk of disappointing someone or something else. Or the most common, C, you set out to accomplish what you and others want and accomplish neither. I strongly encourage you to choose B. As far as we know, we only have one life to live, and it'd be a shame spending it how others deem fit as opposed to yourself. If it's society that's influencing your decisions, I strongly encourage you to dig into that and think about why that might be. If it's your parents' expectations, I'd remind you that at the end of the day, most parents just want their kids to be happy. The second thing I realize is I can't rely on the opinions of others that change how I feel about myself or my own abilities. Believing that I'd feel less imposter syndrome if others around me believed in my abilities was wishful thinking. And ironically, it actually only made me feel worse. After joining larger companies, I felt less confident in my abilities and my imposter syndrome only grew. I felt even more anxiety that it was only a matter of time until others discovered that I was there by mistake and that I really was an imposter. But that never happened either, and to my surprise, I actually got a lot of things done and even got promoted, which made me realize something, which is that I'm clearly able to do the things that are expected of me. This realization has helped me shift my desired cure to imposter syndrome inward and value my own opinions, not always the opinions of others. The last thing that's personally helped me suppress my imposter syndrome is realizing that in the worst case, if I was an imposter, I would lose my job, an experience I've already gone through thanks to being laid off from my first job from college. Now, if I've gone through it once successfully and it only turned out for the better, you know I'm going to believe that I can do it again. Aside from allowing the opinions of others to affect my career trajectory, I also realized that working in big tech didn't really align with much of my larger life goals. In fact, when I actually spent the time to sit down and write down what I thought my larger life goals were, working in big tech only touched on two of them and just slightly. And I think this really stems from me not thinking ahead enough coming out of college. And if you'd asked me back then what my goal was, I probably would have made some mention at working at a specific tech company, but this was short-sighted since I was only thinking one step ahead. Instead, it would have been more ideal if I had bigger, loftier, and more meaningful goals as a North Star to guide me. And because it didn't take me 30 years to achieve what I thought was my goal, when I got offers from some of these companies and worked there, I felt a little disillusioned. Is this what the rest of my life would be like? Was this all that there was to working? What do I do now that I've accomplished what I thought I wanted? And did I really want this at all? And this is actually why I admire a lot of my other YouTube friends. Lots of them have found out exactly what it is that they want to work at and are now dedicating most, if not all of their time towards achieving it. And while building an audience or a company full-time might be more stressful than working a 9 to 5, I also imagine it's more meaningful since it's what they've intentionally decided to do. And now that I've accomplished a goal that 18-year-old Kevin was set on achieving, I've been doing a lot of thinking about what might be next. And this time I'm being way more intentional about my goals and why I want to achieve them. And this might sound silly, but this whole experience has really taught me how important it is to consciously decide what your goals are and why you want to achieve them. And furthermore, to revisit them to make sure that they're still what you want as time continues to pass. I strongly recommend that you take time to write down your goals, because without them, you don't know where to steer the ship. And to be clear, there's nothing wrong with setting the goal of working at a specific company, but again, consider why that's your goal and make sure that it's really what you want. The next thing I finally understood after working at a large tech company was something my dad would often say. Work is a 4-letter word. And while working at these companies is very alluring thanks to things like their pay, benefit, and perks, at the end of the day, you're there to do a job, and in my case specifically, develop software. Prior to joining these companies, the only thing I could think about were the things that my then current employer offered versus the things I could be afforded working in big tech. But the truth is, once you pull back the veil, every single company is doing the same thing. They're providing employment and pay in exchange for your time and skills. So, whether I write code in an internal proprietary IDE or Eclipse, I'm writing code. Whether I ride a scooter to my meeting room or I walk, I'm going to a meeting. And whether I run out of the office to get lunch or walk 100 feet from my desk to be given it, I'm eating lunch. And while I do love and appreciate all the things that I'm afforded, the majority of my time is spent working, like at any other company. And the truth is, some companies offer these extravagant, alluring perks like free meals, gyms, nap pods, game rooms, massages, and more because it actually makes financial sense for the company to do so. Having the resources to eat, work out, play, and even sleep in the office give you that many less reasons to ever need to leave it. And now that I've actually worked in this kind of environment for a minute, it's safe to say that I actually don't take advantage of the majority of perks that I'm actually offered. To be honest, the two things I actively use are the cafes and the gyms. Instead, they're more just fun talking points or things to show my friends when they visit the office, which in turn probably makes more people want to work there to then never actually use those perks. And even if I did actually partake in the majority of perks that I'm offered, they wouldn't actually change my life very much thanks to something called the hedonic treadmill. The hedonic treadmill is the observed tendency that humans return to their baseline level of happiness regardless of what happens to them. Put simply, free food, nap pods, game rooms, massages, and more increase your level of happiness maybe temporarily, but eventually your state will go back to the same it previously was. And once you realize this, you realize that your work is just that, work. A four-letter word. After working in big tech, I've also internalized the fact that you can learn valuable things and grow as a software engineer at companies of varying sizes. So don't get tunnel vision and think that you have to work at a specific company like I did. What I have noticed is that the kinds of things you'll learn will vary depending on the company that you're working at, the technology you use, and the development methodologies and principles that company follows. But regardless of these details, one thing is for sure. As a software engineer, you will be sending, storing, and manipulating data that is sent between clients and servers. Because of this, when you boil it down, software engineering is really the same everywhere. So whether you're working at the largest company in Silicon Valley or you're working at a 3-person startup out of a garage in the Midwest, when you really think about it at its core, those companies are doing the same thing. The one true difference that I have noticed is that at larger companies, you tend to index on problems that only larger companies face, like scaling to support billions of users, adhering to the laws of the countless countries that your company probably operates in, and supporting insane SLAs or service level agreements. And the truth is, while learning about these challenges is interesting and fun, they're really challenges that only a handful of companies on this planet face. That doesn't mean that learning how to deal with those challenges is invaluable, but inevitably that knowledge is applicable to fewer companies. Throw in internal technologies that these large companies build in-house and utilize, and your knowledge becomes that much more specific. And to be honest, part of me really misses moving faster in a smaller environment. There's no need to read the internal docs on internal frameworks, get multiple kinds of approvals on code from different teams across time zones and continents, or potentially wait weeks for your new changes to roll out to production. And it's actually because of this red tape, in a lot of ways, one could argue it might be even better to work at a smaller company. Smaller companies are more resource constrained, and in my experience, this allows you to bear more responsibility and contribute in ways that might not be expected of you in larger companies. And this expands your sphere of influence and helps you learn even more. Smaller companies also use other widely available technology when building their products, which increases the chances of your specific knowledge being more transferable to other companies that you might work at in the future. It's hard to say objectively if one is better than the other, but be sure that you're working wherever you are because it's helping you get to wherever you want to go. If you enjoyed this video, drop a like and subscribe to the channel for more, and I'll see you guys next time.